A man with strange colored eyes watches as a creature crashes from the sky, shards of glass raining everywhere. The creature locks eyes with him, and the man explains in a calm but serious tone. In this world, these mutants are the old race, exiled from what used to be called paradise. The survivors of humanity's downfall are now called outers. He watches as the creature, with scaly snake-like skin and glowing blue eyes, lands right in front of him. This mutation started 400 years ago, after a nuclear war wiped out almost all life. The Earth became a dead wasteland, food ran out, and cruelty became the new rule of survival. Fertile lands turned into barren deserts, and radiation twisted human bodies into something unrecognizable. The rich, the scientists, and a lucky few hid in shelters and avoided the radiation. They called themselves the perfect humans and built the city underground, naming it the Ark. The people left outside begged to get in, but the Ark closed its doors and cut off all communication, leaving the rest to their fate. 100 years later, the Ark sent out a drone to see what had become of the outside world. What it found was terrifying. The glass desert outside had turned into a dangerous place, full of fierce and deadly creatures. Underground, new plants grew, forming a strange new ecosystem where mutated life thrived alongside the scraps of humanity. Human genes twisted over time, throwing them back to a prehistoric state. They became a mix of human and animal traits, stronger and tougher than normal humans, but their civilization fell back to medieval times. People in the Ark called those outside outsiders, while the outsiders called Ark residents the cancer of humanity for abandoning them. The man who saw the outsider fall in front of him smiled nervously. He was now a captive, held tightly by the beast-like outsider, while Ark soldiers aimed their guns, ready to fire. An android officer stepped forward, warning the outsider to drop his weapon and let the man go. He promised they would let him walk free, brushing this off as just a failed burglary. The outsider's smirk grew wider. He looked at the officer and asked what would happen if he killed the captive right there. The android calmly replied that such an act would lead to immediate execution. Hearing this, the outsider grabbed the man by his neck and lifted him off the ground with ease. The androids, programmed to prioritize resident safety above all, froze in place. The outsider barked an order, and just like that, the androids powered down, retreating from the scene. The outsider stood victorious, holding his captive, while the Ark soldiers watched in stunned silence, their weapons useless against his sheer dominance. The outside takes the scientist as his hostage and takes him through a deep tunnel. The scientist tries to spark a conversation with him, but the outsider has no intention of listening to his babble. Instead of getting scared by the outsider's threats, the scientist thinks his voice is incredibly sexy and his physique is pretty good as well. He tries to look at his face but can't see it completely since it's covered by his cap. Turns out this scientist is a pervert guy who doesn't care who he does the deed with. He remembers his time when did the deed with others and explains that he has no preferences for his partners in bed. He can do it with anyone as long as they are willing to do it with him. Even right now, he is thinking of tying this outsider to his bed and doing the deed with him. He starts to wonder how this beast would be inside his clothes. He wonders how he will enjoy doing it with him and almost drools at the thought. He is still about what he can do with this man when he suddenly remembers a bitter memory of his past where a man insulted him by saying that he thinks with his lower half. His mouth feels distaste and he starts sulking remembering this annoying man. Just as the outsider is about to turn from the hallway, he notices something and pulls the scientist into a chokehold again. Laser points at him as the human military soldiers point their guns at him. He informs the other soldiers to act carefully since the victim hasn't been identified yet. The soldiers still have not been able to identify the identity number of the Ark resident. The scientist thinks that the person who handles the security in this area is pretty bad at his work. He addresses to the soldiers and tells them that the person with him wants to go outside so he asks them to open the gate. He tells them that this isn't a request on his side, but rather an order. The man inside the security headquarters wonders who the man held hostage is. After a little thinking, he agrees to the request of the resident. The man controlling security in that area orders the soldiers to open the ark gates, since the way the scientist talked made him realize that this guy was someone from a high rank. He doesn't want to take risks in this situation and lets them go out. The main reason why he asked them to leave is because the ark residents all have a special tracking chip on their necks, so the search team can always search for the missing resident anytime, and since the outsider hasn't killed the resident yet, it means he was valuing his life, so there's a chance he won't kill him anyways. The gates open and the outsider along with the resident is released outside. The outsider lightens his grip on the resident. The doctor is surprised when the grip of the outsider loosens on his neck. The doors of the ark close as the guards become sure that this scientist will be able to find his way back to the ark soon. Chapter 2. The outsider throws the scientist to the desert ground after his use has been fulfilled. The scientist complains why he couldn't drop him a bit nicely. The doctor suddenly feels the weight of the outsider on his back, and he feels himself getting choked. The outsider then grabbed the tracker on his neck and started pulling it. The doctor starts to choke while the outsider breaks the collar tracker off. He told him that he was free now. The outsider told him to either wait for the search party or walk back to the ark himself. He gives him the choice to do whatever he wants to do. The scientist tries to regulate his breath and asks him to take him with him. The outsider clearly denies his request and rejects the offer. The scientist starts acting chummy and argues that the outsider told him to do whatever he wants, so he is doing what he wants. The outsider glares back at him and asks the scientist if he knows where the outsider is going. The scientist smirks and tells him where the outsiders go and refer to their house as the outsider's residential area. The word triggers the outsider, and he tells the scientist that the outsider's residential area is a place where a sheltered young master like this one won't be able to survive more than 3 days. His tail starts to touch the scientist's face as he states that he is more suspicious of the scientist as he is asking him to take him to the residential area. He looks back at the ark and tells the scientist that he doesn't want to have any sort of friction with the ark. His tail slithers around the scientist's face as he tells him that he isn't going to be of any use other than being an extra food source for the pack. The outsider doesn't want the scientist to risk his life, so he flickers his tail to him and tells him to stay back. The scientist, instead of getting scared, grabs his tail and tells him that he isn't some sheltered master and points out the huge hole in the outsider's bag. He tells him that there was a huge hole inside his bag, which showed him the book this man stole from the ark's library. The outsider flicks and moves his bag back as the scientist guesses that the book is actually a medical book. He starts to act friendly and tells him that he is a doctor himself, so instead of taking a medical book with him, it would be better to take the doctor with him instead. The outsider becomes a bit hesitant, but refuses his offer, and tells him that his existence would be very harmful to the pack. He tells him that the ark will chase after him, and if they find their forest, there will be huge harm. The doctor stands up from the ground and tells him that the search party is not coming for him since he had a conflict with Ark. They won't be coming for him. He tells him that he can explain the details if they go somewhere cozy, but the outsider doesn't believe him a bit. He grabs his collar and asks him if he thinks that the outsider is fool enough to believe him. The doctor acts smug and asks him if he doesn't want to use such manpower when it's so easily available for them. The outsider grabs his collar and raises him in the air. The doctor raises his hands in surrender and argues that he will just get scorched to death in this desert if the outsider leaves him there. The outsider drops him again. The doctor starts rubbing his bum after he is harshly thrown to the ground for the 3rd time in the day. As the doctor is trying to understand the situation, the outsider puts his cap and cape on the doctor to protect him from the scorching sunlight. After taking off his cap, It reveals that the man inside the cape is indeed a beautiful man with blue eyes and white hair. He tells the scientist that his body is too weak for this environment, so he needs to cover up more here. The doctor gets taken aback by the handsome face of the outsider and understands why he always covers his face. He is impressed by his handsome face and gets up to follow him. He thanks him for the cover and asks him for his name. The outsider hesitates but tells him that his name is Blue. From an outsider's view, humans of the Ark think of themselves as superior to them. He explains that the outsiders also originated from the human origins, but due to mutations their bodies changed, and the humans started thinking that they had attained the perfect genes. For the Ark people, the outsiders were abnormalities. There used to be exchange transfers between outsiders and the Ark when the outsiders needed urgent medicine to survive in the harsh environment. Blue explains that the exchange was very beneficial for the outsiders, and if the exchange had continued further, this could have been a great turning point for humanity, but an incident caused the exchange to stop permanently. With the continuous exchange, a certain relationship between an Ark resident and an outsider formed a child between the couple was born. The child had more features of the outsiders, and after it was born, it was more aggressive than the Ark had ever imagined. To stop the mutation from spreading in the Ark, they disposed of the child. The people inside the Arks started to get scared of the outsiders and once again closed their doors on them. Blue started thinking that doesn't have the idea on what basis the perfect genes in humans were considered, but based on the staggering humans behind him, their genes were simply weak and not superior to them at all. The duo walks in the scorching sun, and the scientist asks him for breaks, since he has been walking in the desert for a long time. The doctor faints due to exhaustion, and Blue sighs heavily. He walks back and picks up the doctor on his shoulder to take him to the residential area. He looks at him and thinks that this human won't be able to last for longer, but being a doctor, this man can be pretty useful for them. He hopes that this doctor will be as useful as he states himself to be. Chapter 3. The doctor sees a nightmare of his past memory, where someone is telling him to say sorry to them. The doctor as a child begins to cry, and the others push him off the stairs saying he is the worst on them. He suddenly jerks awake and starts to grab his back due to pain. Blue tells him to stop twitching and asks him to get up. He tells him that they are here so they need to enter the forest now. The doctor glares at him and promises himself that he will never forget this kind of treatment. His hand suddenly slips on the ground, and he notices his surroundings. He looks up and notices that he is in front of a crater, and the area around him is shining brightly. He recognizes this place as the glass desert, but Blue corrects him and tells him that this place is called the forest by the outsiders. The doctor looks around in shock and is impressed by the surroundings. He starts to bombard more questions about the crater to Blue, but Blue simply tells him that his colony is in the crater, and they need to go there quickly. The doctor quickly follows him and walks behind him inside the crater. He starts to analyze the surroundings and understands that the outsiders live inside the crater to stay underground to avoid getting exposed to radiation. He starts to study them, and is still wondering about them when he loses his step, and is about to fall into the crater when Blue leaps in and catches him. The doctor gets swooned by him and gets impressed that Blue has a good vision in the dark. He looks at the tired mutant and feels bad that he needs to rest now due to the exhaustion of doing everything by himself. They walk inside a cave and the doctor's mind gets blown away. He looks at the shining cave in front of him and gets mesmerized by it. He asks Blue what this shining thing was, and Blue tells him that forest always shines all the time. The doctor tries to knock on the shining wall and notices its vibrant glow. He asks Blue what kind of awe it was, since he had never seen anything like that in the Ark. He runs after Blue, who is ignoring him, and starts bombarding him with questions. He asks him if the Ark people are aware of this environment, or if anyone from Ark has ever come here to look into the ecosystem. He tells him that the Ark people would have liked it, but Blue gets irritated by him. He tells him that he would still be able to treat patients if he didn't have any tongue or teeth in his mouth. The doctor quickly shuts his mouth and thinks that he will always get more opportunities to search the forest later. Blue walks in front of him and walks to a door. He removes the metal covering doors and greets the people inside it. The doctor quietly followed him around. Inside Blue's home, a cheetah mutant greets him and looks at the tiny human hiding behind him. He gets confused and leans in to have a better look at the human. A female lion mutant approaches them and addresses Blue as Blue Sky, and angrily asks him what kind of baggage is he carrying behind his back. Chapter 4. The lion mutant stands in front of Blue and asks him about the person behind him. She asks him what district this person is from and what was the job he does for a living. Blue confidently tries to argue and calls her Vesper. She states back and asks him what kind of lump he brought with him back home. The doctor starts to think whether Blue really brought him to eat or not. He clutches Blue's shirt as Blue hesitantly tells Vesper that this guy is a doctor. Vesper freaks out hearing this, and her son becomes impressed to see a real doctor in front of him. Vesper pulls Blue to the side and asks him how he got the doctor to come to their colony, while her son looks at the doctor with twinkling eyes full of curiosity. Vesper starts interrogating Blue, whom he stole the doctor from, and panics in fear of starting a war between their race. Blue tells her that he didn't steal the doctor, and he came there with him willingly. The cheetah boy curiously examines the doctor and asks him what type of mutant he is, since his ears are very small. Vesper doesn't believe Blue and tells him that no other pack would let their doctor member to come with a stranger so easily. Meanwhile, the doctor starts to analyze the house and concludes that according to the furniture there aren't many people living in this colony. He assumes that the other members are gone for a hunt. The boy starts to examine him, and his mother calls him Laika and asks him to let go of the doctor. Laika looks at him interestingly and points out that he has small ears like Blue, and asks if he is also a reptile. He notices the doctor's skin and asks if he is a salamander since he has no scales on his body. The doctor notices the physical features of this mutant and concludes that he is a cheetah mutant. Blue calls him out and warns Laika to not touch the doctor so casually. He announces that this doctor is a cancer from the Ark. During this, Vesper gets angry and punches the lights out of the doctor. The doctor faints from the punch, and Laika drags him on the ground with him. Vesper starts to panic and scolds Blue for making such a huge mistake by kidnapping an Ark resident and bringing him to the colony. She tells him to throw away that human at once. She tells him that kidnapping an Ark resident would cause a huge problem for them, and tells him that they will face a lot of causalities if their swamp's alpha finds out. Blue grits his teeth and tells Vesper that he was originally going to leave the doctor back in the desert, but the doctor insists that no one from the Ark is going to come for him and asks him to bring him to the residential area. Vesper is shocked by the senseless explanation and asks Blue what they would do if this guy is a spy from the Ark who is trying to find their colony to kill them. Blue tries to calm her down by telling him that he broke off the recognition band from his neck and the Ark would be able to search for him now. They are still talking about the threats that will come to them if they keep the human with them when Laika brings the doctor to his room and lays him on his bed. He starts wondering why his mom would hire someone so weak. He thinks about how the doctor fainted with a single punch. But in reality, the doctor only fainted for a while and woke up pretty early. He considered pretending to be fainted would be more easier to avoid the beating than waking up after the punch. He starts to examine him and thinks if the doctor is from Ark and also a doctor, then he would be very smart compared to their teacher. He starts to think that he no longer needs to attend school as he can simply learn everything from the doctor. Laika covers the doctor with something squishy and starts telling to himself that he will no longer need to go to school if he studies everything from the doctor. Using this method, he will have more time to join the group in hunting. The doctor starts to understand how the pack works. Laika looks at him with the internet and says that the Ark resident is really pretty and thinks if all the Ark residents are this pretty. He starts to squish the doctor's cheeks, and the doctor starts wondering how the topic got to this point. Laika wonders how such a pretty Ark cancer got out of his city, and concludes that Blue is at the peak age of having a mate, so he thinks that Blue brought him here to make him his mate. He suddenly springs up from his position and yells that mating with an Ark resident would cause a huge problem for all of them. Blue enters the room and Laika jumps on him to hug Blue. Blue hands him the book he stole earlier from the library and tells him that he brought him the book he wanted so badly. He hands him the book so he can use this book to learn more about medicine. Laika looks at the book excitedly and recognizes the book. He excitedly asks Blue if this book will help him to become a doctor. Blue tells him that there is a chance that he can use this book to become a doctor, but for that, they will need to consult their teacher to study the context inside the book. Laika refuses and tells Blue that he won't show the book to the teacher because he will take the book away from him. Laika suggests that he will study the book himself and show their teacher the copy of the text if he doesn't understand something from the book. Blue looks over at the doctor and notices that he has already woken up. The doctor, who was pretending to be asleep, starts wondering if Laika would be able to even understand a single word from the book himself. Blue suddenly asks Laika to take the book with him and read it a bit outside for a while. Laika shyly looks away and tells him that he wants to look at the Ark doctor for a little bit more time. Blue tells him that the doctor will be staying with them for a while, so Laika will have plenty of time to study with the doctor. He then tells him about the real reason why he wants to spend Laika out. He tells him to go out and soothe his angry mother, who was beaming with anger. The clanging sounds from the outside prove her anger. Laika flinches from the sounds coming from his mother and rushes outside. He rushes outside while telling Blue that he shouldn't have broached the subject of bringing the Ark resident to the colony that easily. He smiles awkwardly and tells him that he isn't really that good with his words. Blue smiles at him while Laika runs outside calling his mother's name. He walks over to the doctor and takes off the cover from the doctor. He leans down closer to his face and tells him to get up. The doctor opens his eyes and looks at Blue hovering over him.